The glass shattered against marble. Blood dripped from James Ashford's palm, but he didn't flinch. He couldn't feel anything except the fire crawling under his skin, the violent tremor in his chest, the suffocating weight pressing down like a curse he'd carried since birth. Another woman had touched him. Another failure. Another reminder that he was broken in ways money couldn't fix. His assistant rushed forward, then stopped, remembering the rule: no one gets close, especially not women. James staggered back, his vision blurring, the world tilting sideways as nausea clawed up his throat. This wasn't just discomfort. This was agony. The kind that made him wonder if his body would finally give up, if this time the reaction would kill him. He was 29 years old, the wealthiest man in New York, untouchable in every sense of the word, and completely, devastatingly alone. His grandmother had told him once, in a voice thick with worry, that the Ashford bloodline carried a curse, that the men in their family were cursed to suffer until they found the one, the only woman whose touch wouldn't destroy them. He'd laughed it off back then. Now, gasping for air in his penthouse overlooking Central Park, he wasn't laughing anymore. If you're loving this story, don't forget to like and subscribe because what happens next will blow your mind. James pressed his forehead against the cold window, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars. Somewhere out there, she existed. Or maybe she didn't. Maybe he was destined to die alone, untouched, unloved, a billionaire king in a kingdom made of glass. But that was only the beginning. Across the city, in a cramped studio apartment in Brooklyn, a girl named Delilah Morgan was making a decision that would change everything. She stared at the eviction notice taped to her door, her hands trembling, her throat tight with panic. 3 months. She had 3 months to come up with $12,000 or she'd be on the street. Again. She'd worked doubles at the diner, picked up shifts at the campus library, sold everything she owned except her textbooks and the single photo of her parents, gone now, taken too soon, leaving her with nothing but debt and a fierce determination to survive. But it wasn't enough. It was never enough. Her phone buzzed. A text from her roommate. There's a job posting. High pay. One night. Private event. You interested? Delilah's stomach twisted. She knew what those jobs usually meant. Rich men. Dark rooms. Promises that turned into nightmares. But $12,000. One night. She could finish her degree. She could breathe. Her thumb hovered over the screen. One word. One choice. She typed it. Yes. What she didn't know was that across town, James Ashford had just agreed to attend the same event, a private charity gala hosted by his business partner, a man who refused to take no for an answer, who insisted that James couldn't hide forever, that he needed to be seen, to remind the world that he was still in control, still powerful, still untouchable. James hated crowds. Hated the eyes on him, the whispers, the women who tried so hard to get close, not knowing that one touch would send him spiraling into hell. But he went. Because refusing meant showing weakness. And weakness was something James Ashford could never afford. The gala was held in a converted warehouse in Manhattan, all exposed brick and chandeliers dripping with crystal, the kind of place where millionaires pretended to care about causes they'd never truly understand. Delilah arrived in a borrowed black dress that didn't quite fit, her hair pulled back, her makeup minimal, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone could hear it. She was supposed to serve drinks. Smile. Disappear. That was the job. Simple. Safe. Except nothing about that night would be simple. She balanced a tray of champagne glasses, weaving through the crowd, avoiding eye contact, trying to blend into the background. That's when she saw him. James Ashford. She recognized him from the news, from the magazines her roommate obsessed over, the man whose face was as famous as his fortune. But seeing him in person was different. He stood alone near the bar, his jaw tight, his eyes scanning the room like a predator searching for an escape route. He looked dangerous. Untouchable. And utterly, heartbreakingly lonely. Delilah didn't mean to stare. But something about him pulled at her, a magnetic force she couldn't explain, couldn't resist. He turned. Their eyes met. And for one impossible second, the world stopped. James felt it too. A jolt. A flicker of something he'd never experienced before. Not pain. Not nausea. Something else. Something warm. But before he could process it, a drunk businessman stumbled into Delilah, knocking the tray from her hands. Glass exploded across the floor. Champagne splattered her dress. The crowd turned, staring, whispering, judging. Delilah's face burned. She dropped to her knees, trying to gather the shards, her hands shaking, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall. And then he was there. James Ashford. Kneeling beside her. Reaching for her hand. She didn't think. She just grabbed it. His skin against hers. Warm. Steady. Real. And nothing happened. No pain. No reaction. No curse. James froze. His heart slammed against his ribs. He stared at their joined hands, at the girl in front of him, her wide eyes filled with confusion and something else, something that made his chest ache in a way he didn't understand. For the first time in his life, he could touch someone. Her. What she said next changed everything. "Are you okay?" Her voice was soft. Concerned. Like she actually cared. James couldn't speak. Couldn't move. He just held her hand tighter, terrified that if he let go, the moment would shatter, that the curse would come roaring back, that this impossible miracle would vanish like smoke. But the crowd was watching. Cameras were flashing. His assistant was pushing through, panic in his eyes. James pulled Delilah to her feet, his grip firm, protective. "Come with me." It wasn't a question. It was a command. And before she could think, before she could protest, he was leading her out of the ballroom, down a marble hallway, into a private suite where the noise faded and the world became just the two of them. He didn't know the truth yet. Neither did she. But in 6 hours, everything would change. And 9 months later, Delilah Morgan would wake up in a hospital bed, staring at 2 tiny faces, 2 perfect miracles, and 1 impossible question. How? The door clicked shut behind them. Silence swallowed the chaos. Delilah stood frozen in the center of the suite, her pulse hammering, her mind racing through 100 different scenarios, none of them good. She'd just been dragged out of a gala by James Ashford, the most powerful man in New York, the man whose touch could apparently break curses, and now she was alone with him in a room that cost more per night than she made in 6 months. This was bad. This was really bad. But when she looked at him, she didn't see danger. She saw confusion. Vulnerability. Something raw and unguarded that made her chest tighten. He was staring at his hands like they belonged to someone else, turning them over, flexing his fingers, his breathing uneven. "I don't understand," he whispered, more to himself than to her. "This isn't possible." Delilah took a cautious step forward. "Are you hurt? Do you need me to call someone?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it, only disbelief, only wonder. "Hurt? No. I am." He trailed off, his eyes snapping to hers. "You have no idea what you just did." She frowned. "I didn't do anything. You're the one who pulled me in here. Because I could." The words came out fierce, desperate. "Because for the first time in my entire life, I touched someone and didn't collapse. I touched you." The weight of his confession hung between them. Delilah's mind spun. She'd heard rumors, whispers about James Ashford's strange condition, how he never shook hands, never got close to anyone, how women threw themselves at him only to be turned away by walls of security and iron resolve. She'd thought it was just eccentricity. Arrogance. But this was real. "I don't understand," she said softly. "What's wrong with you?" He flinched at the question, but he didn't look away. "I'm allergic to women. Every single one. Since I was 18, any physical contact with a woman triggers a reaction. dizziness, nausea, pain. It's been 11 years, and I've never found anyone who. He stopped, his jaw clenching. Until you. Delilah's heart stuttered. That's impossible. I know. He moved closer, his eyes searching hers like she held the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. But here we are. The air between them crackled with something electric, something neither of them could name. Delilah knew she should leave. Knew this was too much, too fast, too dangerous. But she didn't move. Couldn't move. Because part of her, the part that had been alone for so long, the part that understood what it meant to be broken, recognized something in him. Kinship. Understanding. Pain. Can I try something? His voice was low, careful, like he was afraid she'd bolt. She should have said no. Should have run. But instead, she nodded. James reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and when she didn't, his fingers brushed her cheek. Gentle. Reverent. Like she was made of glass. Nothing happened. No pain. No curse. Just warmth spreading through his chest, a feeling so foreign, so overwhelming, it nearly brought him to his knees. God, he breathed. You're real. Delilah's breath caught. His touch was fire and safety all at once, and before she could think, before logic could catch up, she leaned into it, her eyes closing, her defenses crumbling. That's when everything shifted. James cupped her face with both hands, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones, his gaze locked on hers with an intensity that stole the air from her lungs. I don't know what this is, he murmured. But I can't let you go. You don't even know me. Then let me. It wasn't a plea. It was a promise. And when his lips met hers, soft and searching and full of a hunger that had been locked away for 11 years, Delilah forgot about the eviction notice, forgot about the $12,000, forgot about every reason this was a terrible idea. All she knew was this. Him. The way his hands tangled in her hair, the way he kissed her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning, the way her body responded, melting into him, craving more, needing more. He didn't know the truth yet. The sweet blurred around them. Champagne from the bar. His jacket discarded. Her dress slipping off her shoulders. Every touch was a revelation, every kiss a question and an answer, every moment proof that whatever curse had haunted him was gone, shattered by this one impossible girl. Delilah's mind screamed at her to stop, to think, to protect herself. But her heart, her traitorous, desperate heart, whispered something else. Stay. Just for tonight. Just once, let yourself have something good. So she did. She stayed. And when morning light crept through the windows, washing the room in gold, James Ashford woke up alone. The bed was empty. The girl was gone. Panic seized him. He bolted upright, scanning the suite, searching for any trace of her. Nothing. No note. No number. No name. She'd vanished like a dream. Like she'd never existed at all. But she had. He could still feel her, still taste her on his lips, still remember the way she'd looked at him, not with greed or ambition, but with something real, something that made him believe, just for a moment, that he could be more than his curse, more than his fortune. He had to find her. Across the city, Delilah stumbled into her apartment, her mind a mess of shame and confusion and something dangerously close to longing. What had she done? She'd slept with a stranger. A billionaire. A man who could ruin her with a single word. And worse, she'd liked it. No. She'd loved it. But that didn't matter. Because girls like her didn't get fairy tales. They got consequences. And 3 weeks later, when she missed her period, when the nausea hit, when the test came back positive, Delilah Morgan learned exactly what those consequences looked like. 2 lines. 2 babies. 2 impossible miracles growing inside her. And the father? A man she'd never see again. A man who didn't even know her name. What happens next will change everything. Delilah stared at the ultrasound screen, her hands gripping the paper gown so tightly her knuckles turned white. 2 heartbeats. 2 tiny flickers of light on the monitor, pulsing in rhythm, proof that her life would never be the same. The doctor smiled, oblivious to the panic clawing up Delilah's throat. Congratulations. You're about 8 weeks along with twins. Both look healthy. Healthy. The word should have brought relief. Instead, it brought terror. Because Delilah was 22, broke, alone, and carrying the children of a man she'd spent one night with, a man whose last name she knew only because it was plastered across every building in New York. James Ashford. Billionaire. Untouchable. And completely unreachable. She'd tried to find him. Spent hours scrolling through news articles, searching for contact information, anything that might connect her to him. But men like James didn't have public phone numbers. They had lawyers. Assistants. Walls built so high no one could climb them. And even if she did find him, what would she say? Hi, remember me? The girl you slept with and forgot? Yeah, you're going to be a father. Twice. He'd think she was lying. Scheming. Another woman trying to trap him for his money. So she'd made a decision. She'd do this alone. Somehow. But that was before the eviction. Before her boss cut her hours. Before the medical bills started piling up, crushing her under their weight. Now, sitting in a free clinic in Brooklyn, staring at proof of 2 lives depending on her, Delilah realized she had no choice. She had to tell him. She had to try. What she didn't know was that across town, James Ashford was already looking for her. He'd been searching for 3 weeks. Hired private investigators. Scoured security footage from the gala. Offered a reward that would have made most people retire on the spot. Nothing. The girl had disappeared like smoke. And it was driving him insane. Because ever since that night, the curse had come back. Worse than before. Every woman who came near him triggered the reaction. His assistant had to conduct meetings through video calls. His grandmother couldn't hug him. Even passing a woman on the street sent his body into revolt. It was like his system had tasted freedom and now rejected anything less. Rejected anyone who wasn't her. Sir, we've exhausted every lead, his head of security said, his tone apologetic. Without a name or any identification, there's nothing more we can do. James slammed his fist on the desk. Then look harder. I don't care what it costs. Find her. Because he needed answers. Needed to understand why she was different, why his body had responded to her and her alone, why he couldn't stop thinking about the way she'd looked at him, like he was just a man, not a fortune, not a curse, just James. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Delilah stood outside Ashford Tower in Manhattan, her heart pounding, her stomach churning with morning sickness and nerves. She'd made it through security by claiming she had a delivery, had somehow convinced a distracted receptionist to let her up to the executive floor. But now, standing in front of frosted glass doors that probably cost more than her entire existence, doubt crept in. What if he didn't remember her? What if he had her arrested for trespassing? What if he looked at her with disgust, with pity, with anything other than the warmth she'd seen that night? She almost turned back. Almost ran. But then the doors opened. And there he was. James Ashford. In a charcoal suit that fit like a second skin, his dark hair slightly disheveled, his eyes sharp and cold until they landed on her. Then everything stopped. His face went pale. His breath caught. For 3 seconds, neither of them moved. Then he grabbed her wrist, pulled her inside, and slammed the door shut. You. The word was an accusation and a prayer. Where the hell have you been? Delilah yanked her arm back, her defenses snapping into place. I've been trying to survive. You know, that thing normal people do when they don't have $1 billion? He flinched. I looked for you. I've been looking for you. Well, congratulations. You found me. The sarcasm was armor, and she needed it, needed something to protect herself from the way he was looking at her, like she was the answer to every question he'd ever asked. James ran a hand through his hair, frustration and relief warring on his face. Why did you leave? Because I'm not an idiot. I know how this works. Rich guy. Poor girl. One night. That's all it was supposed to be. It wasn't. Then what was it, James? She hadn't meant to use his name, but it slipped out, and the effect was immediate. His eyes darkened. His jaw clenched. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off him. It was everything. The confession hung between them, raw and unguarded. Delilah's resolve wavered. I didn't come here for this. Then why did you come? She took a breath. Steadied herself. I'm pregnant. The words landed like a bomb. James froze. His eyes dropped to her stomach, still flat, still hiding the secret growing inside. What? Twins. 8 weeks. Yours. She forced herself to meet his gaze, to not flinch under the weight of his shock. I'm not asking for anything. I just thought you should know. He didn't speak. Didn't move. Just stared at her like she'd spoken a language he didn't understand. The silence stretched, suffocating, unbearable. Delilah's chest tightened. This was a mistake. She turned to leave. His hand shot out, catching hers. The moment their skin touched, something shifted. The tension in his shoulders eased. His breathing steadied. And for the first time since she'd walked in, he looked at her, really looked at her, and she saw it. Wonder. Fear. Hope. You're sure? His voice cracked. I'm sure. James pulled her back, his grip gentle but firm. Then you're not leaving. Not again. You can't just, I can. And I will. He cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek, his eyes searching hers. I don't know what this is between us. But I know I can't let you walk away. Not when you're carrying my children. Delilah should have argued. Should have reminded him that she wasn't some damsel who needed saving. But the truth was, she was drowning. And he was offering her a lifeline. I don't need your money, she said, even though they both knew it was a lie. I need you safe. I need them safe. His hand moved to her stomach, hovering, hesitant. Can I? She nodded, and when his palm pressed against her, warm and steady, something inside her broke. Because this wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about the two impossible lives they'd created, about the connection neither of them could explain, about the terrifying, exhilarating possibility that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't a mistake. It was fate. But what she didn't know was that outside James's office, his assistant was already making calls, alerting his grandmother, setting into motion a series of events that would change everything. And in a luxury apartment across town, someone else was watching. Waiting. Planning. Because James Ashford's curse wasn't the only secret he'd been keeping. And the truth, when it came out, would threaten to destroy them all. The penthouse overlooked Central Park, all floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist luxury, the kind of space that made Delilah feel like an intruder in someone else's dream. James had insisted she stay here. Not asked. Insisted. And after a week of arguing, of trying to convince him she could manage on her own, exhaustion had won. So here she was, sitting on a couch that probably cost more than her yearly tuition, staring at a view she'd only ever seen in movies, wondering how her life had become so surreal. A door opened behind her. She turned, expecting James, but instead found an elegant woman in her 70s, silver hair swept into a perfect bun, eyes sharp and assessing, carrying herself with the kind of quiet power that made Delilah instinctively straighten. So you're the one. The woman's voice was cultured, amused, and surprisingly warm. I'm Eleanor Ashford. James's grandmother. And you must be Delilah. Delilah stood, awkwardly, unsure whether to shake hands or curtsy or simply disappear. Yes. I'm sorry, I didn't know anyone was coming. Eleanor waved a dismissive hand. James doesn't know I'm here either. I wanted to meet you before he had a chance to hover. My grandson can be rather protective when he cares about something. She moved closer, her gaze dropping to Delilah's stomach. May I? Delilah nodded, and Eleanor placed a gentle hand over the barely there curve. Her expression softened, something ancient and knowing flickering in her eyes. Twins. The Ashford line has been waiting for this for so long. Waiting for what? For you. Eleanor settled onto the couch, patting the space beside her. Sit, child. Let me tell you a story. Delilah sat, her curiosity overriding her nervousness. Eleanor took a breath, her gaze distant, lost in memory. The Ashford men have carried a curse for 5 generations. It manifests differently in each, but for James, it's the inability to touch women without suffering. I've watched him grow up isolated, lonely, convinced he'd never have a family, never know love. Until you. But I don't understand. Why me? What makes me different? That's the question, isn't it? Eleanor smiled, enigmatic. Some would call it fate. Others would call it magic. I call it the universe finally showing mercy. James can touch you because you're meant to be together. Because those children you carry are the key to breaking the curse permanently. Delilah's mind reeled. That sounds like a fairy tale. Most truth does. Eleanor squeezed her hand. I don't expect you to believe me. But I do expect you to stay. To give my grandson a chance. Because whatever brought you two together, it's bigger than both of you. Before Delilah could respond, the elevator dinged. James stepped out, froze when he saw his grandmother, then his expression shifted to resigned annoyance. How did you get past security? I own the building, darling. Security works for me. Eleanor stood, smoothing her skirt. Now, I'll leave you two alone. But Delilah, think about what I said. She swept past James, pausing to pat his cheek. She's perfect. Don't mess this up. Then she was gone. James turned to Delilah, apology written across his face. I'm sorry. She's intense. She's amazing. Delilah's voice was soft. And she loves you. Something in his expression cracked. He crossed the room, sank onto the couch beside her, close but not touching, like he was afraid she'd disappear if he moved too fast. I need to tell you something. His tone sent a chill down her spine. What? The reason I haven't been here much. I've been dealing with complications. He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. There's a woman. Victoria Sterling. We were engaged 3 years ago. Delilah's stomach dropped. Engaged? It was arranged. Business. Our families wanted to merge empires. But when the curse got worse, when I couldn't even stand to be in the same room as her, the engagement ended. Or so I thought. He met her eyes. She's back. And she's claiming I owe her the marriage, that my grandmother promised her the Ashford name. Anger flared in Delilah's chest. That's insane. It's also legally complicated. The contract we signed had clauses, penalties. If I marry someone else, my grandmother's foundation loses half its funding. That's millions of dollars that go to hospitals, schools, charities. People who need it. Delilah felt the walls closing in. So you're telling me you can't marry me even if you wanted to? I'm telling you I'm going to fix this. But it might take time. And in the meantime, Victoria is going to make your life hell. As if summoned by her name, the elevator dinged again. A woman stepped out. Tall. Blonde. Beautiful in the sharp, calculated way that came from expensive surgeons and relentless ambition. Victoria Sterling. Her eyes swept over Delilah with barely concealed contempt. So this is the little charity case you've been hiding. Her voice was silk over steel. James, darling, we need to talk. James stood, positioning himself between them. Victoria, you need to leave. I don't think so. She pulled out her phone, tapped the screen, and turned it to face them. Not when I have proof that you've been violating the terms of our agreement. On the screen was a photo. James and Delilah leaving the gala together. Another of them entering his penthouse. A third of them at the doctor's office, his hand on her stomach. You've been having me followed? James's voice was ice. I've been protecting my investment. Victoria's smile was poison. The contract states you can't cohabit with or impregnate another woman during the dispute period. You've done both. Which means either you marry me by the end of the month, or your grandmother's foundation loses everything. Delilah's world tilted. James? He didn't look at her. Couldn't. Because Victoria was right. He'd been so focused on finding Delilah, on protecting her, that he'd forgotten the cage he was already trapped in. Get out, Victoria. Gladly. But I'll be back. With lawyers. She paused at the elevator, her gaze landing on Delilah one last time. Enjoy him while you can. Because in 3 weeks, he'll be mine. The elevator doors closed. Silence fell like a guillotine. Delilah stood, her hands shaking, her voice barely a whisper. Is it true? Delilah, is it true? He exhaled, defeated. The contract is real. But I'll break it. I'll find a way. How? By letting your grandmother's life work be destroyed? By forcing her to choose between you and thousands of people who need help? Tears burned her eyes. I won't be the reason for that. Then what are you saying? She backed toward the door, her heart shattering with every step. I'm saying I was right. Girls like me don't get fairy tales. Don't do this. He moved toward her, desperation cracking his composure. We'll figure it out. Together. There's nothing to figure out. You have 3 weeks to marry her or ruin your family. I'm not going to be the other woman in someone else's story. She reached the elevator, hit the button. James caught her hand. The moment he touched her, the curse that had been silent roared back to life. Pain exploded through his skull. His vision blurred. He collapsed, gasping, and Delilah caught him, held him, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. Then she let go. The elevator doors opened. She stepped inside. And as they closed, the last thing she saw was James on his knees, reaching for her, his face twisted in agony, calling her name. But she didn't go back. Because sometimes love wasn't enough. And sometimes the curse was stronger than them both. What happens next will break your heart. Delilah spent 3 days crying in her apartment, ignoring the calls from James, from his assistant, from numbers she didn't recognize. She couldn't face him. Couldn't face the impossible choice hanging over them like a sword. On the 4th day, she ran out of tears. And on the 5th, she made a plan. She would disappear. Leave New York. Start over somewhere small and quiet where billionaires and curses and impossible love stories couldn't reach her. She'd raise the twins alone, tell them their father was a good man who'd been trapped by circumstances, and never, ever look back. It was a terrible plan. But it was the only one she had. She was packing when someone knocked on her door. Not James. She'd recognize his knock by now, firm and insistent. This was different. Hesitant. Almost apologetic. She opened the door. Eleanor Ashford stood on the other side, looking smaller somehow, older, her usual confidence dimmed by something that looked like desperation. Please don't close the door. Delilah almost did anyway. But the look in Eleanor's eyes stopped her. What do you want? To tell you the truth. Eleanor glanced down the hallway. May I come in? Delilah stepped aside. Eleanor entered, taking in the cramped space, the half-packed boxes, the evidence of a life about to vanish, and her expression crumbled. You're leaving. What else am I supposed to do? Fight. Eleanor's voice turned fierce. Stay. Let me tell you what I should have told you the first day we met. She sat on the edge of Delilah's worn couch, clasping her hands. The contract with Victoria isn't what you think. Yes, it exists. Yes, there are penalties. But there's a clause James doesn't know about. One I buried intentionally. Delilah frowned. What clause? An escape. If James can prove he's found his biological match, the one woman who breaks the curse completely, the contract becomes void. The foundation keeps its funding. Victoria gets nothing. Hope flickered in Delilah's chest. Then why didn't you tell him? Because I needed to know you were real first. Eleanor met her eyes. I needed to know you weren't just another woman after his money, that what you feel for him is genuine. These past weeks, watching you walk away even though it destroyed you, watching you choose his well-being over your own happiness, that told me everything I needed to know. Delilah's throat tightened. So what now? Now we prove it. Tomorrow. There's a board meeting where the contract will be reviewed. Victoria will be there. If we can show the board that you're James's biological match, that the curse breaks completely with you, they'll dissolve the contract. How do we prove that? Eleanor pulled out a folder. Medical tests. Genetic analysis. I've already arranged everything. But we need you there. And we need James to agree to one more test. What test? A public demonstration. In front of the board, Victoria, the lawyers. James will have to touch another woman, show the curse is still active. Then he'll touch you, and prove it's not. Eleanor's voice softened. It will be painful for him. Humiliating. But it's the only way. Delilah's hands trembled. What if it doesn't work? What if the curse has changed? What if it will work? I know it will. But the question is, are you willing to come back? To stand beside him and risk everything one more time? Every logical part of Delilah's brain screamed no. She'd already walked away. Already started grieving. Going back meant opening herself up to more pain, more complications, more impossible situations. But then she thought of James. On his knees. Reaching for her. And she thought of the twins growing inside her, two lives that deserved a father who would fight for them. I'll do it. Eleanor's relief was palpable. Thank you. But I need to see him first. Before tomorrow. I need to know he wants this too. He's at the penthouse. Waiting. Eleanor stood, squeezed Delilah's hand. Go. And Delilah? Thank you for loving my grandson. Delilah didn't correct her. Didn't say she wasn't sure what she felt was love, that it was too soon, too complicated, too impossible. Because deep down, she knew Eleanor was right. She did love him. God help her, she loved him. The penthouse was dark when she arrived. Delilah used the key Eleanor had slipped her, stepped inside, her heart hammering. James? No answer. She found him on the balcony, staring out at the city, a glass of whiskey in his hand, looking like a man who'd lost everything. You shouldn't be here. His voice was hollow. I know. She moved beside him, close but not touching. But I needed to tell you something. He finally looked at her, and the devastation in his eyes nearly broke her. If you're here to say goodbye again, don't. I can't take it. I'm here to say I'm sorry. For leaving. For not trusting that we could find a way. His jaw clenched. There is no way, Delilah. I've spent every waking moment trying to break that contract, and it's ironclad. In 2 weeks, I have to marry Victoria or destroy everything my grandmother built. Not if we prove I'm different. She stepped closer. Your grandmother told me about the clause. About the tests. If we can show the board that I break your curse completely, the contract is void. James's expression shifted from despair to disbelief to something dangerous. Hope. You'd do that? Stand in front of them all and let them scrutinize you? For you? For our children? Yes. He set down the glass, turned to face her fully. I don't deserve you. Probably not. A small smile tugged at her lips. But you're stuck with me anyway. James reached out slowly, giving her time to pull back, and when she didn't, he cupped her face, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized she'd cried. I love you. The words hit her like lightning. James, I know it's fast. I know it's insane. But I've lived 30 years without feeling anything, and then you walked into my life and suddenly I feel everything. And I don't care if it's the curse or fate or just dumb luck. I love you, Delilah Morgan. And I will fight every contract, every curse, every impossible obstacle to keep you. Delilah's defenses shattered. I love you too. He kissed her then, deep and desperate and full of all the words they hadn't said, all the fear and hope and impossible possibility tangled up in one perfect moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, James rested his forehead against hers. Tomorrow changes everything. I know. Are you scared? Terrified. She smiled. But I'm not running anymore. Good. He pulled her close, wrapped his arms around her, and for the first time in weeks, Delilah felt safe. But neither of them saw the figure watching from across the street. Victoria Sterling. With a phone in her hand. And a plan that would make tomorrow far more dangerous than either of them could imagine. The final battle was coming. The boardroom was all dark wood and leather, intimidating by design, filled with men in expensive suits and women with expressions that could cut glass. Delilah sat beside James, her hand in his, her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. Across the table, Victoria Sterling looked like a queen at her own coronation, confident and cold, flanked by lawyers who probably charged more per hour than Delilah made in a month. Eleanor sat at the head of the table, her presence commanding silence. Let's begin. The lead lawyer cleared his throat. We're here to review the marriage contract between James Ashford and Victoria Sterling, specifically the clause regarding Mr. Ashford's obligation given recent developments. He glanced at Delilah with barely concealed disdain. Miss Morgan, you claim to be carrying Mr. Ashford's children, correct? I don't claim. I am. Delilah's voice was steady despite the fear coiling in her gut. And you're aware that Mr. Ashford's contract prohibits cohabitation and conception with another party during the dispute period? I'm aware now. I wasn't when it happened. Victoria leaned forward. Convenient. Enough. Eleanor's voice cracked like a whip. We're not here to debate Miss Morgan's character. We're here to invoke Clause 7. The room went silent. Victoria's lawyer frowned. Clause 7 was a theoretical provision. It was never meant to be, it exists. And it's valid. Eleanor slid a document across the table. Clause 7 states that if James finds his biological match, defined as a woman who negates his condition completely, the contract is dissolved. No penalties. No obligations. Victoria's composure slipped. That's absurd. There's no such thing as a biological match. Then you have nothing to worry about. James stood, his hand still gripping Delilah's. Let's prove it. The doctor Eleanor had hired stepped forward, a no-nonsense woman with kind eyes and a tablet full of data. I've conducted extensive testing on both Mr. Ashford and Miss Morgan. Genetic markers, hormonal analysis, neurological scans. The results are conclusive. When Mr. Ashford is in physical contact with Miss Morgan, his cortisol levels drop, his immune response normalizes, and the inflammatory markers that trigger his reaction to other women disappear completely. She pulled up a chart. This is unprecedented. In 30 years of medical practice, I've never seen anything like it. The board members murmured. Victoria's lawyer stood. This could be faked. Data can be manipulated. Then let's do a live demonstration. Eleanor's eyes glinted. James, are you willing? He nodded, his jaw tight. The doctor gestured to one of the female board members. Would you mind? The woman approached hesitantly. The moment her hand touched James's arm, he staggered. Pain lanced through his skull. Nausea rolled through him. He pulled back, gasping, and Delilah surged to her feet, catching him. The room erupted. You see? Victoria's voice rose above the chaos. He's still cursed. This girl changes nothing. But James straightened, his eyes locked on Delilah's, and slowly, deliberately, he pulled her into his arms. Held her. Kissed her forehead. And nothing happened. No pain. No curse. Just peace. The board members stared. The lawyers scrambled through documents. And Victoria's face twisted with rage. This is a trick. She's drugging him, or using some kind of enough. Eleanor's voice was final. The clause is clear. The demonstration is conclusive. James has found his match. The contract is void. Victoria slammed her hands on the table. I will sue. I will take everything, you'll take nothing. James's voice was ice. Because the contract you're clinging to was based on fraud. You knew about my condition. You agreed to marry me anyway, thinking you could outlast it, that eventually I'd be desperate enough to settle. But I'm not desperate. I'm free. He turned to Delilah, his expression softening. And I'm exactly where I want to be. Victoria's lawyer whispered urgently in her ear. Her face paled. Then, without another word, she stood and walked out, her heels clicking against marble like a retreating army. The board members began filing out, murmuring amongst themselves. Eleanor approached James and Delilah, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I'm proud of you both. James pulled his grandmother into a hug. Thank you. For everything. Don't thank me yet. Eleanor smiled mischievously. You still have to plan a wedding. And trust me, that's going to be far more challenging than any contract. Delilah laughed, the sound bright and free and full of relief. I think we can handle it. 3 months later, Delilah stood in front of a mirror, staring at herself in a wedding dress that made her feel like a princess, her stomach round and full with the twins who kicked and squirmed like they were as excited as she was. Susan, James's sister who'd become Delilah's closest friend, adjusted her veil. You look perfect. I look huge. You look happy. Susan squeezed her hand. And that's all that matters. The ceremony was small, intimate, held in Eleanor's garden under string lights and a sky full of stars. Delilah walked down the aisle alone, no father to give her away, no family except the one she'd chosen. But when she reached James, when she saw the way he looked at her, like she was the only person in the world, like she'd hung the moon just for him, nothing else mattered. You came back, he whispered as she took his hand. I never really left. The officiant spoke words about love and commitment, but Delilah barely heard them. All she could focus on was James, on the warmth of his hand, on the promise in his eyes, on the impossible miracle of this moment. When it was time for vows, James went first. I spent most of my life believing I was cursed. That I'd never know what it felt like to be touched, to be loved, to be whole. And then you appeared. You, with your stubbornness and your strength and your refusal to let me hide behind my fortune or my fear. You didn't just break my curse, Delilah. You saved my life. And I promise, for every day I have left, I will spend it proving that you made the right choice. Delilah's voice shook as she spoke her own vows. I came to New York with nothing. No family. No plan. No hope. I was just trying to survive. And then one night, I met a man who saw me, really saw me, not as a charity case or a problem to solve, but as someone worth knowing. James, you gave me more than love. You gave me a home. A family. A future I never thought I'd have. And I promise, no matter what comes, I will stand beside you. Always. When the officiant pronounced them married, when James kissed her with a tenderness that made the small crowd sigh, Delilah felt something click into place. This was it. This was her fairy tale. Not perfect. Not easy. But real. And hers. 6 weeks later, on a snowy December morning, Delilah gave birth to twins. A boy and a girl. Both healthy. Both perfect. James held them, one in each arm, tears streaming down his face, and Delilah watched him fall in love all over again. "What should we name them?" she asked, exhausted but glowing. James looked at his grandmother, who'd been by their side through everything. "Eleanor." "For the girl." Eleanor pressed a hand to her heart. "And the boy?" James met Delilah's eyes. "You choose." She thought of her parents, gone but never forgotten. "Ethan." "After my father." "Ethan and Eleanor Ashford." James tested the names, smiling. "Perfect." And as Delilah watched her husband cradle their children, as she felt the warmth of the family surrounding her, she realized something. The curse had never been about touch. It had been about finding someone worth holding on to. Someone who made the risk of pain worth it. Someone who turned loneliness into love. James had been waiting his whole life for her. And she'd been surviving, fighting, hoping for a miracle. They'd found each other in the chaos. Two broken people who became whole. And now, looking at her children, at her husband, at the life they'd built from one impossible night, Delilah knew. This was just the beginning. If you loved this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share because love like this deserves to be celebrated. And who knows? Maybe your own miracle is just around the corner.